I think of Kizuki like the opening or the gateway that opens us, that reminds us that, well, of course, what is. Of course, you are. Of course, I am. And it opens our eyes to all of the ways that we had distracted from it.
My guest today on this episode of the Ikigai podcast is Mae Yoshikawa, the creator of Kizuki journaling and a pioneer in wellness throughout the Asia-Pacific region. Raised in Japan and shaped by Eastern philosophy and global experience, Mae's work lies at the intersection of awareness, resilience, and clarity. After becoming the first Japanese woman authorized by the founding school of Ashtanga Yoga in South India, Mae's life was profoundly impacted by personal loss. From that loss emerged Kizuki journaling, a structured method for self-reflection that transforms discipline, breath, and reflection into a practical framework for conscious living. Her TED Talk on Kizuki, introducing the Japanese concept of an awakening moment of insight to a global audience, was named one of the top 10 most watched TEDx talks in January 2026, sparking an international conversation on self-awareness. Mae has served as a global ambassador for Adidas Yoga since 2015 and received the Yoga Journal People's Award for Social Impact in 2016. Welcome to the podcast, Mae.
Hello, it's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. It's good to connect. So I attended one of your webinars and that was a lot of fun and very helpful. So we'll talk about that later. But I'd like to start with something that's on your website. It states that you are 1/4 American and 3/4 Japanese. So would you like to touch on that and share a little life history?
Sure. So I like to say that I look Japanese. I speak American English, but I found my heart in South India. And that pretty much encapsulates the eclectic mix that I am. I do look more Japanese than my sisters, but my mother was half American and half Japanese. But my siblings and I were all raised here in Tokyo, attending international schools. So we all speak fluent English. And I have had some turbulent times in my life, the first of which was my parents' divorce during my teenage years, which really kind of rocked me because it destabilized the core of my family and my understanding of love and relationship and trust. And about 2 years following that, my mother developed a very rare neurological disease that presented itself as young onset atypical Alzheimer type dementia, meaning we didn't know how much longer she would remember my name, or she had spatial misrecognition. So she might be thirsty and reach for a cup of water and completely miss the cup. She would get lost on her way home, walking home from the train station and things like that. So some of these things really rocked me to my core at a young age, leading me to go on a search for what's real and what's going on. Like, who is my mother if she loses her ordinary character and her capabilities as my mother, or these roles that we all play in life? It made me sick. It made me a depressed insomniac by age 20. And I quickly saw that if I didn't do something about it, then my mother's disease would not only take her life, but it would ruin mine too. And so my search led me to yoga. And through yoga, I discovered not only physical health, but also coming back to my breath and really the unity of breath and body that started to do wonders for my health. But then I saw that I could have perfect breath and perfect body fitness, but if my mind was depressed, you're just not healthy, you're not balanced, I am not living a fulfilled life. So throughout my 20s, I really dove deep into traditional Indian yoga. I traveled to India and I kept a house in India for some 13 years. So I would study at the feet of the guru, as they would say, and then come back to Japan. I became a yoga teacher and I would teach all over the country. I became somewhat of a pioneer in terms of teaching and leading the practice of holistic yoga when the yoga boom hit Japan. I would say from about 2005 onwards, I was heavily involved with Japan's first yoga magazine. I was their cover model for some 10 years. And then I opened my studio. And more recently, it was actually under COVID that I wanted to develop these teachings into an even more accessible way. And so I developed this journaling method, Kizuki journaling, which you experienced. It helps to invite the aha moment of insight or awareness to come to clarity about your life and thereby to enrich your life by living in alignment with your clarity.
Yes, we'll touch on that. So thank you for all of that. I can relate to parents getting divorced. I mean, I guess it's unique as to how it comes about, but it certainly changes a family's dynamic. And somehow you have to process and deal with it as a child. So that's something I can relate to. And yes, I did see on your website, you're on the cover of all these yoga magazines, like at least 50 covers or something.
Yeah, close to 50. It is 40 something. Yeah.
So I thought, wow, she must be very good at yoga. And you've had this very interesting life. But I really stumbled upon your work through YouTube with your TED Talk, Kizuki, the Japanese aha moment that changes life. And you've already shared some of what you talk about on that TED Talk. So how did that opportunity come about?
Yes. I mean, where do I even begin with that? Touching upon this, our mutual experience of grief and some of these other things in my life that I touched upon, like my mother's illness, it's basically loss. Emotionally, it's the experience of grief. And in my personal experience, I would argue that grief, I mean, if there were ever any sort of ranking that we could measure, what are the emotions that human beings most want to avoid, the ones that we want to run from? I would rank grief as the boss of that list. I think there are many varieties of grief and there are different shades and expressions of grief, but whether it's the slow, ambiguous grief that I experienced with my mother, or a sudden rockiness like with parental divorce, or the loss of life as you used to know it before, that puts you in such stark awareness of being in the unknown. I think that is a scary place for a human being to sit in. So if I were to put it that way, I would say that a lot of my current work has to do with supporting the development of clarity and awareness that helps us in daily life, but also essentially prepares us with resilience through these life tsunamis, as I refer to them. But my background, of course, has been largely in yoga and through yoga, meditation. But journaling, I started even before yoga. I started in my teens when my parents got divorced. I didn't have a therapist. I didn't have anyone to go to, and I just started writing everything out. So in the last 6 years or so, through COVID and beyond, there's been this merging of the variety of tools that I've used to help me through my own life. So there's the yoga, and then there's the meditation, and then there's the journaling. Another huge thing in my life that I didn't mention before was that I lost my husband in a sudden traffic accident in 2018. And this was acute grief because this was a vibrant young athlete of a 37-year-old that left the house for work one morning, and I never saw him alive again. And in that experience of grief, there's nothing like death that puts you face to face with truth. It brings things out, not just in yourself, but in all of the people around you too. All of our attachments, all of our longing, all of our avoidance. I mean, grief just kind of lays it bare. And I was severely grief stricken. But at the same time, I felt so grateful. Everyone said, Mae, I mean, I had 2 young kids and I had just lost my 37-year-old husband. And everyone said, Mae, I'm so sorry for your loss. Like it was the end of the world. And they were right. It was the end of the world as I had known it. And I felt it. I felt every little drop of grief. I felt the heaviness of all of it. At the same time, I couldn't deny this, what I would call extreme gratitude, because I knew that if anyone had any foresight that this beautiful, young, kind, gentle man was going to die suddenly, I was the one he wanted to spend every waking moment with. I was the one he wanted to raise kids with, build a family with, work for, provide for, laugh with. I was the one he wanted to do everything with. And so my grief it didn't even take turns, simultaneously had this extreme gratitude right next to it. And I had this massive, what I would call Kizuki, like this insight, this aha moment that everyone's got death wrong. Death is just not what everyone thinks it is. Death is not this end all doomsday. And that if we live under that belief, we live in fear constantly. But that if we could reframe that, it opens life to much deeper meaning. And I had no idea how I would interpret it or how I would share the message. And it did, by no means did it do away with my grief. I still had to go through every single day of that. I still do. But it was this experience of the loss of my husband that made it clear to me that this idea of Kizuki, this aha moment of insight, which when you see it in clarity, you can't unsee it. When you come to clear recognition of it, there is no turning back. That I would be the one to speak about it, write about it, tell about it, invite people to speak of their Kizukis, because I know it's universal and I know everyone's got them, and to open a global conversation about living from that level of clarity. But having said that, I had lived and worked in Japan for all of these years, and I hadn't put any of my content or my writing even in English. So it took me years to begin to rebuild my self-expression and my content from there. But the TEDx talk was really an extension of me dreaming to bring this concept of Kizuki to a broader audience beyond Japan.
Hey, it's Nick here, and I just wanted to touch base and tell you about my new book, A Year of Ikigai, a collection of short and simple daily reads over 365 days for easy understanding and integration of the Japanese concept of Ikigai. You can now pre-order this book through Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It's a very powerful talk, but I do like what you've shared, and I really appreciate what you've shared. Loss and grief, at least it tells you how much you've loved or how much love you've received. So as painful as grief is, it means I was in love, I felt love, I was loved. So it is, death is inevitable, as we all know. So I think what you've shared is very illuminating, and we can have this different perspective and be grateful for the people who've looked after us, loved us, shared their life with us. And I guess that's why, we have grief, because we've been loved. And then I guess that's where that gratitude can come from. So I think all your years of meditating and learning yoga must have helped you come to this incredible Kizuki.
For sure. I mean, without the yoga and the meditation as a daily, consistent practice for years, I wouldn't have survived some of these occurrences in my life. And particularly with the passing of my husband, it was so sudden that I was definitely in a precarious place for a while without the presence of my children and also these practices of yoga, breathing through something, being able to sit in meditation in all of the uncomfortable and the unknown, and journaling, writing out my thoughts and feelings and giving a safe outlet where all of your dark, scary thoughts and feelings can be admitted in truth and not avoided. I think these have been life changing and life saving practices for me.
Well, I agree with you in terms of the power of journaling. And it really is that internal conversation you have with yourself. And you can only be honest. You can't, there's only so much time where you can delude yourself, but you eventually have to face reality. And I guess if you go deeper into these more meaningful questions or more challenging questions or areas of your life where you do have avoidance, you become to understand yourself more. And then I guess once you have that, you seem to get back in control of life, or I guess acceptance. So it's very powerful. And I encourage people to journal. And this really relates to the opening statement of your TED Talk, this amazing opening statement. And I'd like to quote it is, "The greatest poverty of our time is not money. It is the loss of our attention, the currency of consciousness." And I was like, wow, I'm going to watch the rest of this TED Talk. And I agree. We're so distracted, we're overstimulated, and there's very few moments in the day where we're fully present. So, yeah, would you like to talk about this internal ache as you describe it?
Yeah, internal ache of not being seen, not being met. Well, we can't even talk about that without first talking about attention, right? Because attention is one of the first and foremost functions of the mind. It's invisible, but everything you do with your mind follows where you place your attention. And yet, it's not really taught in an effective way. I mean, you might go to school and your teacher tells you do this or do that, or you're expected to focus on what you're writing or focus on what you're listening to. But there's not really a lesson on how to place your attention, how to keep it there for how long and why not. It's almost disempowering the way that attention is just left hanging up for grabs. And like you said, it gets stolen by these advertisements and these noises that surround us daily. And the crazy thing is, it's not just external noise. It's the fact that a lot of it gets internalized. So have you ever caught yourself like humming a song and you're like, oh, where did I get that song from? And it came from some lousy commercial that you heard 3 days ago and it's still stuck in your head. Or maybe you have scary thoughts in your mind, thoughts that tell you, oh, you're not good enough, or, oh, you need to work harder, Mae, or you need to get yourself together. And you think it's your own thoughts in your own head. But if I ask you, when was the first time you had that thought? Chances are you're going to remember that time when you were, 4 years old and you spilled something and your mama told you you're no good, or something like that. And so these thoughts and these ideas that take our attention, they're not standalone events that come in isolated Tupperware containers. They come on a whole chain of events. And maybe if your mama told you that, what did her mama tell her when she was a child, or, And so as human beings, we're truly relational beings, and we are wired for our attention to be available to each other. And if we're so open and if we're so malleable, you better have a good filtering process in place to begin to choose with awareness what you want to make yours, which thoughts you want to own, where you want to place your attention, and where you don't want to place your attention, because otherwise you're going to feel like you're leaking energy. And that's where the yoga practitioner in me comes about, because through yoga, I had a very disciplined method of noticing and minding what my energy was doing, where it was going, and where it was leaking, and how I can govern it. And so there's a physical aspect to that too. And then there's the energetic aspect of controlling the breath. But the mental aspect of it is really where you're leaking attention. And so if you haven't caught that yet about yourself, and you're leaking attention to, oh, he said some insults about me and I'm still thinking about it 3 days later, or this happened in the past and I try to forget about it, but every now and again it comes up. I find that the human system, your mind, your body, your energy, your breath, it's designed to balance you. It's designed to help you to heal yourself. So if you have recurring memories or things that are still stuck in your psychological web, your system is telling you, hey, do you want to take a look at that yet? It's kind of inviting you to greater awareness. And if you don't take heed, if you don't listen to those signals, you end up kind of making yourself a little smaller or making your world a more narrow place. And you might catch yourself one day feeling lonely or disconnected because you don't know how to connect with others. And I think that's what I meant when I talked about the ache, because a lot of people feel that ache as a very real pain. They just haven't been guided or taught, like, what is that ache telling you about yourself?
It is interesting how we do. I mean, I'd probably relate much of what you're talking about to resentment, how we can be resentful of something that's happened years or decades ago, but we can still obviously have some unconscious trigger. And then we have this memory of someone violated me, or we think they did, or someone did me wrong, and reliving something that's happened a long time ago. And then you kind of start to feel unease and tense, your breathing changes. And either, I guess, you're right, either you haven't fully looked into that and maybe let it go and accepted it, or you can get stuck in this horrible cycle of resentment when there's so much to be grateful for. So mind can be this amazing, wonderful, guiding friend. At the same time, it seems to be this sort of horrible person sort of reminding us of, remember that happened, or mum said that, or dad did this. And yeah, this awareness, I guess this general awareness we need to have. But then we also have these moments of Kizuki, which can be life-changing and transformative. And I do have moments in my life where I remember I had this realization. I almost call it like an angel's tapping me on the shoulder. And then from that realization, I made a decision, and it changed my life. For me, it was actually deciding to start this podcast over 6 years ago. And I was frustrated by the Western interpretations of Ikigai and the Venn diagram and all these romantic ideas, and I felt someone should do something about it. But it actually took me a year. So I even had these moments of Kizuki, but I didn't have enough self-belief. And then one night, I don't know, maybe the Kizuki was like powerful enough for me to think, right, I'm going to get a domain name. I'm going to start the podcast, and I'll reach out to this Professor Hasegawa, who was always in these articles. And yeah, here I am talking to you, and it's changed my life. So I think it'd be really helpful to dive into how you define Kizuki, because I really relate to the way you define it.
Thank you. I define it in two ways. Firstly, it's the aha moment of awakening insight that helps you to see clearly, perhaps something that you hadn't seen before. It can be as small as noticing a freckle you hadn't seen before, or something as big as a downright life-changing epiphany. But the essence of it remains the same, that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you realize it, there is no de-evolving to not having realized it. And the second definition that I like to add on to that is that a Kizuki can be incremental steps in awareness. So some Kizukis are like, kaboom, aha, well, of course I have to do this podcast. If I don't do it, who else is it going to be? And it's clear. Whereas others incrementally need to build to almost like prepare you and ready you to be able to handle the gravity and the capacity of, oh, yes, of course. So sometimes, for example, I hear about people who have been in years, sometimes decades, of a relationship or a marriage, and they knew that something was off. They've known for years that something was off, and it builds and builds and builds until, oh, yes, I need to leave him, or I need to leave this, or, so it can happen both ways. But in the traditional sense, the Japanese word kizuki is to place ki or energy on. And in this case, the ki energy here is the attention that we're placing on it. And it kind of boils back to that attention factor, because we're surrounded by things. And in one moment, you can't place your attention on everything. You can only place your attention on so much. And so I think of it like it works like a spotlight or a searchlight. If you shine it this way, that's where your focus goes. That's where your attention goes. And that's the thing that gets highlighted. Or you can widen it or narrow it like laser beam focus, which also means that there's a whole lot of stuff that we're surrounded by that we're not seeing because we haven't yet placed our attention on it. And that's the interesting thing about a Kizuki, is that it could have been right in front of your face the whole time. Like my friend, for example, was married to this man for 16 years. And she was like, okay, I need to leave him now. It's like the truth is in front of your face, but sometimes we're not willing to see it. And hence this aha sensation sometimes is the awakening factor.
That's quite fascinating when others see you in their eyes, or they see your relationship in their eyes. It's sometimes radically different to your own experience. And this is why it's helpful to have sometimes a coach. A coach can see what you can't see in yourself, or they see behavior that you might think, oh, I don't do that. Or so, yeah, we don't always know even our own behavior, or we can't always see our relationships, I guess, fully. But yeah, it's really interesting. Like, I guess the more control you have of your mind, the more you can direct it to things you care about and the things that inspire you. But it always comes with this awareness or these Kizukis. But often we have life happen to us, and you share that our life often stops at one word, why? And it's usually an injustice of our world, or an unpleasant or horrible life experience. And we often say, why me? Why my husband? Why my wife? Why my parents? Like both my parents died of cancer. And like, why both? Or why now? Why this? And you talk about, you went through this when you talked about your mother's decline in her health. And you had this, probably the biggest Kizuki of your life. So would you like to talk about that too?
Yeah, sure. I want to dovetail on what you said earlier, because you reminded me of this quote. It's one of my favorite kind of visual metaphors. And have you heard this, Nick? It goes, let me try to remember this and say this as clearly as possible. It goes like this. There are three mysteries in life. To a bird, it is air. To a fish, it is water. And to humankind, it is himself.
I haven't heard that, but I like that. I'm going to remember that one.
Yes. So you said that this question, why, had stopped life in its tracks. I want to surgically separate that because it's actually not true. My experience was that it stopped my life, but actually the mind that said why, the mind that was stuck in the narrative loop of why, that was why I experienced this stuckness. But life itself had never stopped flowing. Life itself never stops at death, at sickness, at loss, at grief. It feels like it because your mind takes that event and it interprets it or narrates it. It kind of runs a loop on itself by saying, why this? Why now? Why me? Why did this happen? You know, this is a psychological cry for help. And maybe now we have a little bit more of an evolved understanding of mental wellness. So when something like that happens, or when we catch one of our friends in such a loop, we say, hey, can we help you? We are there to support each other, to interrupt that loop. And maybe you seek professional help, or maybe you get therapy or counseling, or you pick up a journal and pen or something to release this looping pressure of pain that you put upon yourself. A few decades ago, when I was going through this with my mom, we just didn't have that kind of knowledge. This kind of information just wasn't available so much. I mean, let's see. My mom's first symptoms started in 1997. She was diagnosed in 99. And then, for the next 16 years, right? Her health and her wellness was a decline. But no one taught me how to deal with life's hardship that was so big. I was just a kid. I was a high schooler, and then I was in university, and I had just barely started working, and I had to support my mom and worry about paying my tuition and going to school and minding my own depression and insomnia and all of these beasts. Of course, my mind was going to loop why? Because this is resistance to what is. Because what is sucked for me. What is meant my mom is sick. She's dying from this. You're not sleeping. You're falling apart. It just felt like if I admitted, if I allowed, if I accepted everything that was going on, it felt like death to me, or to my ego, should I say, because I just didn't have the capacity to handle it. I was never taught that, never modeled that, or these things. It just wasn't a conversation yet in day-to-day society. It wasn't the kind of thing that, you pick up a magazine and read about. I think nowadays it's a little different. Yeah. So the question, why tortured me for 3 years. But because I had also started yoga and started meditating as an extension of yoga, I began to learn how to watch my mind. Okay, so get this. My first experience with meditation was after a yoga class. So I guess the only meditation teacher I've ever really had was also my yoga teachers. And he only gave me one direction, 2 words. Just observe. That was all he ever told me. And I took it and I ran with it. Because what do you do? What do you do when you need to swim, or when you're wanting to learn to swim and your teacher just throws you in the ocean and goes, just swim. You just swim for your life. That's how you learn to swim. Okay, this is old school style. So I would just sit for minutes and then eventually hours just observing. And I was like, observe what? Observe my body, observe my posture, observe my breath, observe the fact that I'm smelling things from the house next door, observe the noises that are surrounding me. And then, because I would meditate with my eyes closed, I would observe that the thoughts going through my head were, like I said, often colored by the things that I had read the night before or the stuff that I'd seen on TV. And so I started to observe the subtler aspects of the mind to a point where I could observe my thoughts and feelings, or at least I was beginning to. I noticed almost immediately that there was an impulse to control the thoughts and feelings. Like I wanted to police them around. Because if I felt depressed, I didn't want to allow the depression. If I felt like I wanted to cry, that didn't feel safe to me. I better shove it down so that I can go to work. Then I noticed that incessantly underneath, I was always carrying this frustration of the torturous, why me? Why this? Why did my life have to be like this? And when I saw that, and I would say that this was a more incremental Kizuki for me. There was a process to this. When I began to see the why, not just as this thought that I was in, like I was in the why this, why me, why this, why me. But then I saw it as just a thought loop that I'm in. For the first time, I was outside of it, to an observer standpoint where I could see in clarity that, oh, this is a thought, and this is a thought that I'm looping. And I also weirdly noticed that there was a pull in me that didn't want to let go of that narrative. Because what would I mean if I let go of that narrative? I would accept it. Like I just couldn't imagine letting go of it because I didn't know what it meant for me. But here's what happened is that I was so desperate. I was so sick of being depressed and insomniac. And I was so tired of this why loop that I saw in clarity that this mental narrative was the root of my unhealthiness. And I thought to myself, I mean, if you catch yourself banging your own head with a hammer, what are you going to do? You're going to stop, right? And it was like that, except it was verbal. I was up against myself. I was hurting myself. And at some point I would have to stop, even if it meant becoming someone I didn't know who to be. And so I stopped. And it felt for a while like I was just in outer space because I had let go of the old identity that was so enmeshed in the why. But there was yet no new identity of, oh, who I am beyond it. I was just in this midair space. But sure enough, it made me healthier because I wasn't banging against my own head anymore. And that gave me a sense of light. Like light as in it's brighter that way, so I'll walk in that direction. And also energetically lighter. Like I felt eventually, not immediately, but eventually I felt more joy and more laughter. And it was curious to me because my mom's situation hadn't changed. She was still sick. She was still going to die. But I felt lighter. And that was true. And that's what I ran with.
Thank you for sharing all that. I mean, I'm seeing this perspective of acceptance. So you have denial, anger, why. And we definitely have trauma, yeah? So there are some traumatic moments. So you just can't immediately accept them because they need to be processed. But there obviously comes a point where, as you said, you become the observer, and with acceptance, things change. But it almost sounds like we buy into this identity of why, like this doesn't happen to me, this shouldn't happen to me, this shouldn't happen to my family. And you have this narrative you hang on to because it's kind of defining you or protecting you or giving you some logic to what's going on. But eventually, yeah, we have to come to accept what we can't control, but also accept, oh, what I'm feeling now is not helpful. It's not helping. And it might seem impossible to accept what's going on, but eventually I think you do. And then that's when I think you get to this place. described where you're lighter, you're feeling better, your perspective of life has changed, but the actual conditions haven't. Probably her condition was getting worse. So it actually reminds me of a word called Arugamama. It translates to it is what it is, but it's more sort of philosophical. And so I'm wondering if obviously Kizuki helps you get to acceptance. I mean, even on the train today, I sort of I work from home, so I don't really go out that much, but I took a train today and I found myself not wanting to look at my phone because why am I wanting to look at my phone? There's nothing really I need to know. So I started to observe everyone else. And, someone in front of me was having a call and talking on their phone. And as soon as he started talking, this man got up and left because he was clearly frustrated. But almost everyone was distracted by their phone. And I was thinking, I don't have much hope for the future of the human race. Like, we're all looking at this screen and we can't sit and not be stimulated. It's like we have to be stimulated now. But if we just sat and were present, we could have these amazing insights or Kizukis. So, more of a reflection. But I guess that is a question. If we have more Kizukis, do we find acceptance more quickly?
Kizuki can be about anything. So it can be about acceptance or it can be about other angles. But to the extent that acceptance opens us and guides us to the awareness of what is, or the expanse of Arugamama de, like you said. And Arugamama meaning, like you said, what is. And also, you are who you are. I am who I am. I am what I am. These are all Arugamama, right? Like, what is this? It's all inclusive. I think of Kizuki like the opening or the gateway that opens us, that reminds us that, well, of course, what is. Of course, you are. Of course, I am. And it opens our eyes to all of the ways that we had distracted from it. Whether it's our phones or whether it's our misplaced attention or the beliefs and the narratives that have us looped in a particular perspective that's keeping us from seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah, this is really interesting because it's all kind of comes from us, these moments of realization, but then we also need to be present to them. But it does sometimes feel like they're gifted to us. We have this, like, where do our thoughts come? Yeah, it's so weird, yeah?
Yeah. Well, so when I teach the journaling method, because I do these facilitator certification trainings now, and so we kind of really hone in on the concept of Kizuki. So when we deep dive into the concept of Kizuki, I often talk about how a Kizuki cannot be forced. If you don't see something, I can't make you see it. I can try my hardest to explain it to you, to put it in front of your face or whatever. But if there is some mental refusal on your part that you don't want to see it, or maybe you don't want to interpret it that way, or you're unwilling to let go of your perspective, that is free will domain. And I cannot get into your mind and make you see something, even if it is the bigger picture, right? And there is a sovereignty to every person, to every person's mind, every person's perspective that I would say is sacred. We are not here to meddle in each other's business, especially not the business of our minds and our beliefs, right? But having said that, a Kizuki can be prepared for, it can be invited. If you want to choose more Kizuki, if you want to choose more openings, more awareness, then you choose, and this goes right into the practice of meditation or mindfulness practices, but it's like choosing open-mindedness, choosing curiosity over fear, And safety. This is a huge one that I talk about with everyone in my community. Well, physical safety, of course, but given that most of us have some level of safety enough to, I don't know, hang out and listen to a podcast. Psychological safety, right? Emotional safety. Like in my case, in my 20s, I felt threatened by my own depression. I didn't feel safe under my own skin because my mind was telling me scary thoughts. I didn't feel safe enough to feel these things. When my children have sad days or even the grief-stricken days, because the older boy remembers the loss of his father, right? When they feel angry or frustrated, I don't tell them not to cry. I never say to them, oh, don't cry or don't be angry. I'm careful to allow whatever it is they're feeling and to make sure there's a safe outlet for it, but also that they don't get, well, I want them to have the context within which they can feel and savor all of these human emotions and thoughts. But if we allow them, then we also have the bigger capacity to see them as a temporary feeling, and a feeling is always 100% without fail temporary. Thoughts can be trickier because, like me, you might stick and cling to one thought and loop it. Why? You don't just think why once, you think it again and again and again and again and again, but it's actually still just one thought that you're regurgitating. So the allowance, it feels paradoxical because the allowance is like, oh, you have to go into it more. But when you do, then you can also observe it and you don't cling to it. You let it pass, right? So the safety is such an important aspect of allowing us to be Arugamama de, to be as you are, that it's okay to feel these things. It's okay to have those things. And that who you are in essence is actually unmoved by any of the surface level experiences.
Yeah, the parenting piece is really interesting. And I remember reading a book about parenting just before my son was born. And the sort of the best line from this book was, if you want happy, resilient children who grow into, I guess, thriving young adults, get out of their way. Let them have their own experiences. Yeah, just get out of their way. Let them live each experience. And it was really powerful. And then it made me so aware of other parents who are very controlling, and every moment they're trying to stop their child from doing this or doing something supposedly wrong or in the wrong order. And it looked so horrible and destructive, even though their intentions were mostly good. And I thought, oh, you're destroying this little person's creativity or freedom or soul. And that's kind of what society does. You know, once they get old enough to go to school and they have to handle all this structure. But yeah, we kind of need that space to realize things, to grow, to understand, to see things. This is why living in another country, like where it's radically different to yours, opened your world. So obviously for me, moving to Japan, everything about Japan's pretty much different. So you're going to have Kizukis like all the time. And it's whether or not you embrace them. And some you might think, oh, gee, that's really weird or strange. But the more you embrace them and the more you're so willing to learn a different way, yeah, the richer your life becomes. So this Kizuki is like everywhere in our life.
Yes.
It happens daily. And I guess if we're not having them, we're kind of clouded, or we're having that repeat thought. So you have a journaling method to help people process or have more Kizuki in their life, more aha moments. So would you like to touch on that?
Yeah. The journaling method has just been a development of my entire career because I started in yoga and I became a yoga teacher. And as an extension of yoga, because I wanted to also convey the interior aspects of yoga. So I started teaching meditation. And this is what would happen. So as a yoga teacher, I had people coming up to me all the time saying, oh, I want to be healthier, like yoga. I hear yoga is good for the body and for the mind, but I'm just not flexible. Like I can't touch my toes. So they would be turned off by the fact that they don't want to roll out a yoga mat and go bare feet, right? And then as a meditation teacher, people would come up to me and say, Mae, I really should meditate. People tell me it's really great all the time, but I just keep falling asleep. I just can't seem to sit still for 5 minutes, And so they quit or they don't start. And then when COVID hit and there was just tremendous insecurity and uncertainty and loss and sickness and grief and just a lot of murkiness, the people really needed these tools. They came to my yoga and they came to the meditation and everything. But I also wanted to give these people that maybe didn't want to stand on a yoga mat or maybe didn't want to sit still for 10, 20 minutes. I wanted to give them an even more accessible tool because pen and paper, everyone's got at home. And what if I just give you one theme, 3 prompts that are incisive, that get into the center, the heart of your murkiness, and ask the question that you've never asked of yourself. And a prompt like that prompts your attention to that angle, to consider that perspective you had never looked at about your own life. And then you go, whoa, I didn't know I was feeling those things. And then boom, you realize that about yourself. You're one step closer to knowing yourself that much deeper and that much better. So my method, Kizuki journaling, is based on that concept. I try to create a safe space and a ground within which these Kizuki moments may happen. And each session is one theme with 3 prompts that's interwoven with a guided meditation. And I would say that the guided meditation and the pivotal 3rd prompt are probably the most unique points about the journaling method itself. But another interesting thing about my approach is that sometimes when you're learning and practicing different journaling methods, you might have seen before that sometimes they say, well, after you've journaled it out, leave it for a few days or go to sleep or, come back to it in a week and see if you have new perspective on it. I just didn't really believe that was necessary because as a meditator, I was trained to leave my own thoughts instantly and just zone out, right? Because I've trained my attention to move into or move out of something. So I didn't need to sleep on it overnight to leave it. I could leave it at will. So I wove that into the journaling method. So the 1st and 2nd prompts would sort of set you up to lay out everything that's going on inside. And then the guided meditation is designed to move you out of your familiarized loops. And the pivotal 3rd prompt would give you the new angle and say, what if you looked at it this way? Now, what do you think or feel?
Well, I attended one of your Kizuki journaling workshops, and you put a lot of care into your prompts, especially the 3rd one. And the 3rd one was quite profound, but it certainly gave me insight into, I was so free and friendly as a child. And I would be like the child who would see someone eating alone and say to my parents, oh, why don't we invite that person to eat with us? Or I'd be on a flight and there'd be an old man sitting by himself and I'd go up and sit with him and just talk to him. And then my parents actually told me, oh, that man had tears in his eyes when we left. And it's like, oh, there's this person, this young soul in me. That your kind of prompt had me thinking later. And the prompt was a bit different to that, but it did spark all this introspection and thought about this, true self, or this, what would you say, this self before the world starts to screw us up.
Well, and the same self today that was on the train that opted not to be engaged with your phone and instead just took a look around and had a broader view, right? This awareness that you are. So beautiful.
It is. And then you kind of feel free for a moment, relaxed, and you're not burdened by habit or impulse. So it's a good space to be in, this space of awareness, and where you can have these Kizukis. I was going to ask you, I mean, we should talk about what you do, because you do have a program where you certify people to become facilitators on your journaling method. I think you've got quite a few. So how's that going?
Yeah, so because my life and my work base has been in Japan up until now, the journaling program in Japan, I started in January of 2021, and it's really picked up speed. It led to me publishing the journaling book last summer. And then the certifications are now, we just completed our second year, but these have been offered in Japanese. So even though they're offered globally because we're online now, and more recently, I have finally started offering these Kizuki journaling sessions in English. Like, why not, May, right? So I finally started that. I am looking into hopefully soon starting English-based community so that we can do that on a regular basis and have the Kizuki journaling sessions as well as like Kizuki sort of immersion sessions in a place for us to come together with that in mind. And then eventually I want to build that so that the journaling facilitator certifications can be offered in English as well.
Exciting times ahead. So this is fascinating. You created this journaling method and this program from nothing, from your mind and your thoughts and a process and testing things. And I've done something similar with my own certification. So the mind is like this amazing creative partner. When you have a Kizuki and you think, I'm going to create some sort of journaling method, or I'm going to create some sort of certification program, and your mind gets to work, and you have this unique creativity to produce it. So when our mind is with us and connected to us, we can produce these amazing things. But when we're stuck in resentment and we're not aware, I guess this kind of relates to suffering. Like, this is how we suffer, because we're mindlessly responding to all the stimuli around us. But I did want to ask you, I mean, first I want to say congratulations on that, and I wish you all the best with your English cohorts. But I did want to ask, what has been a recent Kizuki you'd like to share?
This is coming to me at a really interesting time because I have been having a massive Kizuki this past week. And I actually recorded one of my own podcast episodes because it's a bit of a story. I came to a realization of a familiar story that was partially true, but it wasn't like full truth for me. So you might have to excuse my language on your podcast here, but I basically called myself out on my own bullshit. It had to do with me making familiar excuses about keeping myself small. It actually goes right hand in hand with, like, come on, fluent English speaker, mixed race, global minded. Why haven't I put my content in English and done these English sessions? Why was my TEDx talk the first public speaking opportunity in English? Like, come on. There had to be some stories there. So these are the layers that I'm uncovering in myself.
Wow. I mean, you look like a seasoned professional speaker from your TED Talk, and you're also a very good facilitator. But that's the mind again, the mind kind of trying to keep you safe or delude you and think, don't do that.
Yes. So my my familiar narrative was my favorite excuse, which was largely cultural. Because being a Japanese woman, I think we're conditioned to be somewhat reserved, modest, one might even say humble and small. I don't think any of my friends would call me like any of those things. But I think there was a layer, like you said, of my mind wanting to, keep her safe, keep her small, too risky, don't go that far. And so the TEDx talk was particularly meaningful for me that way, because it really was the first time that I really just put myself out there.
Well, it's a powerful talk. We'll link to that and your websites from our show notes. But if our listeners do want to reach out to you, where should they do that?
Oh, thank you. I'm on Instagram at MaeYoshikawa. And you can also visit my English website. It's maey.live. For those that are interested in the journaling, it's kizukijournaling.com.
Awesome. We'll link to all of those. But I'm glad I stumbled upon your YouTube video, your TED Talk, and it gave me the Kizuki to reach out to you. So I'm glad I did that. And who knows, we might catch up when I come to Tokyo in May.
Lovely. Thank you so much for discovering me. It's an honor to connect with you and with your audience.
Likewise, thank you for spending time with me and sharing all these amazing insights and this personal wisdom.
Thank you.
This episode of the Ikigai podcast was brought to you by my new book, A Year of Ikigai, which you can now pre-order from Amazon and Barnes & Noble.